Hello, hello, and welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Peo. My guest today is Emily Melious. Emily is the founder and CEO of Launch Consulting. She helps people first companies increase engagement, productivity, and profits by harnessing employees' untapped talents. Welcome to the show, Emily. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm super excited. We got connected through Oleg, and Oleg is just an amazing, heart-centric individual. And you talked about employee first, people first, heart-centric type companies that you love working with and helping people stand out, get placed. So tell me a little bit more about what you're up to and what you're doing.
Well, I help individuals achieve success and fulfillment. And I think that's important. There's a lot of successful but totally unfulfilled people out there by owning their strengths and finding their fit. And then that translates into the work environment because honestly, it's a win win between companies and the people in them when employees are fulfilled because they're also more productive and satisfied. So it just comes back to that fulfillment piece, and I think we all deserve it. But I think sadly, there's some people might stumble upon it, some people never reach it, and for most people, it feels very elusive. But in reality, it's actually a fairly simple formula. Once you understand it, then you can intentionally design it in your life and in your business.
Well, let's talk about what is that formula?
Yeah, so my proven proprietary formula for fulfillment is three parts. So it is skills, passions, and talents, or to say it another way, your what, your why, and your how. Why that, it might feel very straightforward, which it is, but what's so revolutionary about that for most people is that for all of our lives, we've been taught to only look at two parts of the three-part formula. So I'm sure everyone has heard of skills and personality. Everyone's heard of IQ and EQ. And while those are part of the formula, your fulfillment needs to align with your skills, your experience, your training, your knowledge. It needs to align with your passions, your why, your values, your beliefs. But you can't stop there because the smartest person is not always the most successful or fulfilled. The most passionate, motivated person, nicest person is not always the most successful or fulfilled. And so that's what is so game changing about the work that I do and the insight that I get to provide to my clients is this third part of the mind, this third critical piece of the puzzle, which is your how. We each have an ingrained way of taking action and getting results. It's not even necessarily what we want to do or what we're taught to do. It's very distinctive from all those other schemas we've used to think about ourselves. And so that's why it's just such a non-negotiable in creating a more fulfilling life and creating a company that's filled with fulfilled people.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go right into our current affairs right now. Like it's no surprise COVID has definitely changed and shifted the way we work in our jobs, in our businesses, our personal relationships. And I think what's happened, at least for a lot of people I've talked to, is pre-COVID, we lived in a certain place and our jobs and our careers tended to be in a convenient space, meaning logistically close. They were the opportunities we had presented to us, and they were like, people that we worked around with because they were conveniently close. And so we went about our job and we would get a good job. I like my job, I do this good stuff, but a lot of us weren't fulfilled. And then COVID happens and we go start working virtually, and we realize that we don't have to necessarily work where it's convenient. We can find those fulfilling jobs that might not have been available to us because of, hey, I can't work there because my kids go to this high school or this school or this timetable. Like I have these other obligations. I can't work flexible hours, or I can't work these other things because I got kids that have other, or I have other obligations. Maybe it's my parents I'm taking care of, but there's a lot of stuff. And all of a sudden you go like, hey, we don't have to be tied down to an office or a timetable or a clock, a time clock. We can work where we want, how we want to work, and we can start looking to work for places that we find fulfillment. So if we have good skills, we have talents, but maybe we're not feeling like, hey, our work is valued, or maybe we're not feeling like we're making a difference, we can go find those places to go work. And I think there's going to be this huge shift of people going like, hey, what is important right now? And importance is going to be, where do I find my fulfillment? Do I, and you're going to start listing these non-negotiables, which is going to be less about maybe salary, benefits, the commute, all that goes out the window. And now it's going to be like, hey, I want to create a career that's conducive to my lifestyle. Like, right? Like, I don't want to drive 2 hours every day and then work 10 hours a day. And then, maybe in 20 years from now, I'll be able to afford to retire and travel the world and spend time with the family. Like, why don't we just create those lifestyles now that allow this job and the lifestyle to mix together? And that's maybe a little bit of my own bias of what that fulfillment looks like. But I think a lot of people are going to go start seeing, hey, we don't have to do things the way we've been doing it. The world is now open to us. It's going to be huge that you could go work basically anywhere for anybody and take your skills, and people will go like, hey, look, we're going to make a spot for you. Like, where do you see that happening with the clients you're working with and finding fulfillment?
Well, like you said, I think those trends were already in the works for several years, if not decades, but definitely in more recent years, we saw more of an emphasis on work-life balance, and the millennial workforce valued different things than generations past. And we were getting more boundaries set around work hours and lifestyle, and having a crisis just accelerated that. So I couldn't agree more that in a crisis, we take stock of our priorities and think more about what our core values are. And that absolutely blew up the job market, and things look very different. Now, there's two sides to every coin. So while individuals, professionals are now open to worldwide job opportunities, I can be in Pittsburgh where I am and get a job in Denver if I want to. But that also means that a Denver company now isn't limited to looking at the talent pool in Denver. They can find people in Pittsburgh. So I think it's going to be an interesting shift that honestly still has, I think the outcomes of that and the byproducts of that we have yet to fully see, and will take years to flesh out. But I'm excited about that. I think that's the way it should be. I think these geographic limitations didn't make sense, because you should be free to find the best job available to you, and one that is fulfilling because it checks those boxes and you have that alignment. But companies should be free to go find the very best talent. And so to me, it kind of feels like more of a democratization of work opportunities and giving people more choice, which in my mind is always a good thing. But it does invite more competition, and it causes us to have to be on top of our game, both as organizations to really attract the best talent, and as professionals to be extremely attractive. And I know the work that you do, being clear about who you are, being clear about communicating that to others and advocating for yourself and living with intention. This is not a time to coast by, because the world will coast by you.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of personal branding. And I think a lot of people that get the idea of having a personal brand tend to be business owners or sales reps or people that need to be out there in the face of the public. And the reason why they're doing it is like, hey, if I'm making a personal brand, which to me is like, hey, I'm just putting myself out there, uniquely me. I'm showcasing my talents, my skills, my goods, my bads, the stuff that attracts people into your life as friends. We're just putting it out there for the world to see, to kind of make better relationships with people a lot quicker. And so we do that. But then there's a lot of people that are like, hey, I'm behind the scenes. I don't need a personal brand. I shouldn't do it. And then there's companies, I think, that they don't know what to do with their own brand. So they just put the logo out there. It's kind of cold. It's kind of stuff. But there's a few companies out there that are really highlighting personal brands for everybody within the company. They're pushing it out there, and they're doing it for recruiting purposes, because they put this idea of what their culture is like. And then when they say, I need to hire 100 coders, Like all of a sudden their recruitment is the costs go down, but the people that are applying for it are like top notch. They're already excited because that's a place they want to go work. They're like, oh man, I want that is the company I want to work for. I love what it's about. And if you're like one of those people that goes, I would never work there in a day in my life, you're going to know that ahead of time. You're not going to waste your time applying for jobs that you're not going to fit in or not like, or maybe you go through the whole interview process and find out like, hey, we don't think you're really a fit for this company. It's like, well, we would have known that like right up front. One, if you're putting yourself out there as the personal brand, they're going to know if you're going to fit in or not, and you're going to know if the company's going to fit in or not. The other side of the thing is not just like the fit in, but also the skill set of advocating yourself. You just mentioned a lot more competition. So if I go from like, hey, I want to hire somebody for this role, normally they'd need to live within a 20-mile radius of me to come do this job. They can do this around the world. All of a sudden there's a lot more applicants. What's going to make you stand out more? That you got a nice resume that's all polished and it says your objective at the top, or somebody that goes on your LinkedIn profile and says like, oh, you've worked successfully on projects just like the stuff we're going to put you on. You have this skill set that we know, and also you're kind of interesting, and you also have some hobbies and talents that I have hobbies and talents in too. Like we're going to click a lot better. Like you're going to shoot to the top of the job applicant pool. Whether or not you're the best qualified candidate, it's going to make you stand out. And I think that that's this huge shift that a lot of people aren't ready to take on.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to mention based off of what you shared, and the first is that everybody has a personal brand. We all do. It's just a matter of whether you own it or somebody else gave it to you. So you can own the impression that you give. You can own how you communicate about your strengths. You can advocate for yourself well, clearly, and confidently, or you can let other people label you, let other people apply what they perceive you to be onto you. But it's not a choice between I want a brand and I don't want a brand. You already have one. Do you own it? Is what I would challenge everybody listening to think about. Secondly, I have a friend that says all employees are brand ambassadors. And that's, an important concept, like you said, to be mindful of the culture and how that's translating down to each individual and how that's giving off a message around your organization. How are people talking about you when you're not in the room? That's for you as an individual, that's for you as a company. And that's a really critical piece. Like you said, there's more competition. We have to be thinking about this. And companies need to be thinking about it in a more collective sense, and individuals need to be thinking about that on an individual level.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like everything we do is putting out that brand of who we are. And it's like the things you don't do defines who you are. So if you're not doing anything, you're going to be defined as somebody like, hey, either I don't know who them, they're insignificant. Like, do you want that to be your brand? Like, oh, they're insignificant, or do you want it to be something that you're in control of, and you're curating the message, not what people are applying to you because they're making judgment. How many times this happens all the time, at least to me. I worked in a company with a tie. I wear a tie to work,
Mhm.
and I look kind of serious. And people just assume like, oh, you're stuffy and you're serious. And you're like, but if you get to know me, I'm not like that. And I think a lot of people are that way. They have a business face they show up for work with, and we make an assumption like, okay, I only know you in this one capacity, and I make some assumptions about you, and I think, yeah, this is somebody that's this way. And then like you get to know them a little bit outside of work and you realize like, hey, they have similar interests, or they have unique hobbies, or they have a whole nother life that, or another set of experiences that brought them to where they are. And you might have just made like some judgments. Like one of my um, favorite people I've had on my podcast is a gal named Hannah Donji. And if you met Hannah, you'd think like, oh, this girl went to Harvard. She was a lawyer. She's just like polished, and she probably had silver spoon in her born in her life, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So you go through her story and you find out like she came from a background where it wasn't affordable, and her, these accomplishments she did were very huge undertaking. But we just make this assumption by somebody that we don't know, and we lump them in a corner. So I think that just applies to, if we're looking for a job, or we're a company, or trying to attract talent to it, we need to put out there and define what we're like to work with, and what we're like to work for, and showcase who we are. And it's going to it's going to start attracting more of those right people into it. But there's also this idea of, if we're just defining, hey, this is the people we want to attract, maybe it gets a little too homogenous, and we do need to, bring in different ideas, different backgrounds to provide a variety of sources. But I think too, when you bring in, every time you add another person to the mix, you go from 2 people to 3 people. That's, a 33% increase of people. That's going to affect the culture. And same thing when you go from 10 to 11, or 100 to 101. Maybe not as much, but those groups and those dynamics change. So culture is huge. And you mentioned a little bit about core values too. Like, how do you work with your clients with helping them define core values and finding the right fit for the companies that they want to go work for and find that fulfillment?
Well, there's gosh, so many different ways we can attack that question. But I would say, first off, it's important to understand, because you also talked about team dynamics and culture. We need to understand where we should unify and where we should diversify. And I find that when organizations, entrepreneurs are building culture, sometimes that can become confusing. So core values are a great place to unify. We all want to be on the same page, and you want to build a team around a shared vision, shared mission, shared values. And we could have a whole other separate conversation, and I'm happy to, about how to think about crafting values. I'll say one thing or maybe 2 things I'll add in here that I think are really important when you're creating those values are: one, they should be rooted in the realities of today, not aspirations. If your values are something you want to be, but they're not who you are today, then that's not ideal. They should be descriptors, again, of exactly who you are today. The second thing that I think is really important about values is they shouldn't be givens. I see organizations create values around honesty or integrity. And though those are great, I sure would hope that would just be a given. And so when you're thinking about these shared values, they should be distinctive. They shouldn't be something that other organizations can claim or easily latch onto, or, would be true across the board. So keep those in mind. But when we're thinking about values, that's where we come together. Then, when we're thinking about getting results, when we're thinking about crafting teams, that's where we need to diversify. And diversity is a big topic today for very good reason. And that means a lot of different things. And something I don't hear talked about as often, but is important in the work that I do, is operational diversity. So this is more than meets the eye kind of diversity. So this is about, are we bringing in multiple approaches to problem solving? So we're all motivated by and fueled by the same passion and value, and we're working towards the same goal, but we have different routes for getting there, because we know scientifically synergy does not come from cloning. If everybody's doing things in the same way, taking action, problem solving, that's actually a recipe for groupthink, which is one of the biggest cancers to organizations. It'll take you down really fast, and you don't even know it's a problem because everybody's patting each other on the back. It feels good, but it kills the company. Sometimes people create a conflicting organization where you have different departments that have similar operating styles, but between the departments are very different. And that's where we get polarization. So it's an us versus them culture, where the sales team can't stand the engineering team, right? So people
Mhm.
but that synergy is in that careful coordination, scientific coordination. This is one of the things that we do for our clients, of operational diversity, where you have a reflection of multiple methods, but you're all inspired by the same thing. And though, I mean, these are pretty sophisticated concepts, which is why I think oftentimes people miss the mark, because you can't really guess on these things, or you can maybe arrive through trial and error, but that error piece can really hurt a company.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote. It's a Steve Jobs quote where he says, "We hire the smartest people around, not so we can tell them how to do their jobs, but that they can tell us how to do ours. And I think a lot of companies get that wrong. We're gonna hire the smartest people, and then they come in and they go, but we don't. This is how we want you to do it, and don't disrupt the boat too much, and kind of stay in your lane, even though these skills and stuff that you've learned from other places might have a spot like that. That's not for you to mix up. But before we run out of time, I do want to make sure we get a little bit of insight into who you are versus just this expert on career coaching. But what led you to seek fulfillment and owning your own business, and what brought you to where you're at now with the ideas that you're talking about, the ideas that you're helping people learn and helping them get find their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Love that question. So it started with being the daughter of two entrepreneurs, business owners, and separate businesses. And so I grew up knowing that that was normal to me. And while it was never pushed upon me, that was a model that I was able to observe, and I saw what that looks like or could look like. And then, I eat my own peas. I practice what I preach. I, at a very early age, and then continued on that path to understand myself, be clear about what I need, what fulfillment looks like for me. And you can ask my husband, because we joke about it all the time. That meant I wasn't in a corporate setting. I'm not really. Actually, my dad jokes. He calls it certified unemployable, and it's I think you get this too. There's something in us that inspires us to build this path for ourselves. And
Mhm.
it's just in me. And thankfully I knew that about myself. So I was able to create that reality and impact other people. Of course, that's an important part of why I do this is it gives me more freedom and more ability to impact the people and provide fulfillment to them too. But it just started early on, knowing myself and being honest about where I fit in and where I don't.
That's great. Did you work a corporate culture for a little bit to figure out that you didn't fit in, or you went right
Not.
into
Now I have clients that I have businesses of all different sizes, and some of them are more that corporate world. That's enough for me to get into that world. I I would certainly work hard. I mean, I'm a type AAA kind of person, so I would absolutely work very hard at whatever job I was in, but that would not be fulfilling for me. And
Mhm.
so I knew that enough to not even have to go there.
Very, very, very aware. Self-awareness is huge these days. So what is something that somebody might not know about you that they would be surprised to learn?
Something that they would be surprised to learn. I actually just got this question in a team building exercise for a board that I'm a part of yesterday. And I told them, I'll tell this to you too. I was a drummer in high school. So I was the drum captain for 3 years of the drum line. And if you know me, I'm not necessarily that might come off a bit more wild child than I normally might seem. And yeah, but otherwise, I'll have to think on that one. I'll think if I can get you an even crazier wild one, but
Do
that tends to usually surprise people.
you still play the drums? You have a drum set in your garage?
I don't. We got rid of the drum set, but I do have a pad and some sticks for my son. He's 7 and he took up interest and I jumped on that. So I can still, we have the book and I can teach him. I know enough to do that, but and I could probably, I don't know, I might be able to jump in the marching band here or there if I needed to, but no drum set.
No drum set. Very cool. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be all in?
Well, for me, being all in is the same formula of being fulfilled. It's to be in alignment with your skills, your passions, and your talents. Because if you're not checking all of those 3 boxes, you're only partially in. You're only half in, and fulfillment only comes when you're all in.
Yeah, and fulfillment's so huge, and I think it's completely overlooked
Mm.
because when we are in a job search, we're like, I need a job. I need some money, right? We need to check those other boxes. I want to get a job and I want to use my skill set. And then we go with the options we have. We might have 1 or 2 job offers. Sometimes we have just the one, sometimes we have a few, but we go and then, the long-term value of like what is important to you to feel fulfilled is a lot of times not really thought of. So I love what you're doing there, helping people out. So let's talk a little bit about your ideal clients, your ideal audience. I know you also have a podcast. So who are you really looking to get connected with? Those people that just make you excited to wake up in the morning. It does not feel like work at all.
Oh, yes, love it, not feeling like work at all. So first would be, uh, business leaders, company leaders who care about people and value them, but feel like they're getting bogged down in people problems, and it's keeping them from accomplishing the vision for the company. And then also, I'd love to talk to folks, professionals who want to advance in their career, are tired of settling for success. They want to be successful and fulfilled, but they're unclear of how to do that with clarity and confidence and intention.
Cool. So where can people go if they want to get connected to you?
A great place to go if you're an individual professional is emilymelious.com. And if you're that business leader in an organization, go to launchconsulting.io. But all paths lead back to me ultimately. So,
I'll pass Emily.
yep, yep, yep. So check out one of those. And I look forward to chatting with all of you and hearing your story and um, helping you become more fulfilled.
Awesome stuff. So those links will be listed here in the show notes. You can go reach out, connect with Emily, find her on LinkedIn, all these places, connect with her. And if you do reach out, have a conversation, make sure you let her know you heard about her on the All In podcast with Nate Peo. So thank you, Emily, for your time. Had a great time chatting with you. And I think we have more topics to discuss in the future. You got a lot of knowledge, and I think it's a lot of value.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.